Okay, we ready to begin? Is Richard with us?
He is.
Good. Okay, well, good morning and welcome to the January 13, 2022 meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. The first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from our December 2nd, 2021 meeting. I move their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstention, the motion carries. The second item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 16, 2021 meeting. I move their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? That motion carries. The next item on our agenda is my report. So today we will be hearing from one campaign from the 2017 election cycle. We'll be hearing from the treasurer of that campaign, and we'll be hearing at our next meeting from the candidate. So there will be no decision today with respect to that matter. Last month, the board hosted a hearing to hear feedback from candidates, campaign staff, debate sponsors, and other stakeholders about the 2021 elections. We heard interesting testimony on the CFB's matching funds program, which was significantly expanded in 2021. Testimony from the hearing is available on the CFB's website under the News and Media section. Now I will turn it over to Executive Director Amy Loprest for her announcements.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone. I just have one quick announcement. There will be a special election in New York for New York State Assembly District 68, and we have published on voting.nyc a voter guide with information for about that special election that covers East Harlem and Randall Islands and small parts of Central Harlem and the Upper East Side. So if you are in those districts, you can look for information about that special election on voting.nyc.
Thank you. So the candidate appearance today relates to the candidacy of Dylan Schwartz for City Council District 51 in Staten Island during the 2017 general election cycle. And I believe we have the treasurer or the final treasurer, there were several from that campaign appearing today. So would you please identify yourself, and then I'll ask the staff of the CFB to just sort of generally describe what the issues are before us, and then you'll have a chance to speak.
Mr. Jerkowitz, if you could raise your hand so that we can promote you to speaker so you'll be able to speak. And I believe for the Campaign Finance Board, Joseph Gallagher will be speaking.
I am present, Jeremiah Jerkowitz.
Good. Okay. So Mr. Gallagher, would you just sort of tee up the issues for us, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Jerkowitz.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board, Executive Director Loprest, and Mr. Jerkowitz. I'm Joseph Gallagher, Senior Counsel for the CFB, and appearing with me today is Victoria Telt, a Senior Auditor at the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Dylan Schwartz campaign in the 2017 general election for City Council District 51 in Staten Island. The campaign was a participant in the program and received public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following 8 violations of the Act and board rules: failing to provide bank and merchant account statements, filing late disclosure statements, failing to demonstrate compliance with subcontractor reporting and documentation requirements, accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee, accepting over-the-limit contributions, converting campaign funds to a personal use, making impermissible post-election expenditures, and failing to respond to the initial documentation request and draft audit report. CFB staff further recommends the board find the campaign must repay public funds. The campaign contests these violations and penalties and repayment obligation. And as you said, Chair, the treasurer of the campaign is appearing today and the candidate is scheduled to appear at the February 10th, 2022 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Jerkowitz, the floor is now yours.
Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Jerkowitz, and I was the treasurer for the Schwartz 2017 campaign. Thank you for giving me the time to speak this morning. My role as treasurer started on negative terms because the treasurer before me stole money from the campaign. I know that the funds stolen were returned and deposited into the campaign account, but I do not know why evidence was not provided. That being said, it was before I began as treasurer. I was pressured into the role, and I wanted to be supportive of my then fiance, Dylan Schwartz, because he said he could find no one else to serve in the role. I had never worked for a political campaign prior and had no accounting experience. From the beginning, I was in over my head. During the campaign, I did my best to keep up and ensure there wasn't no abuse of finances. I deeply regret taking on this role as I was not prepared and did not have the skills to do it effectively. Speaking to the violations, none of them were made with malicious intent. I was not part of contract creation or signing, and I was not part of any hiring or firing of staff. A number of the staff left on negative terms and did not provide letters of resignation. I did not realize those would be required and apologized for not requesting them from the staff. Due to the negative experience with the campaign, it has become very difficult to get in touch with former staffers. I was able to make contact with one former staff, but he did not provide a resignation letter or response to the violation. Martha Aon, the former campaign manager, provided a response that I forwarded to your legal team. She was the only former staff I was able to get in touch with. All of the staff that left the campaign were no longer owed payment and did not volunteer service to my knowledge. After the campaign ended, I asked my then fiance, Dylan Schwartz, in December of 2017 to handle further correspondence with the CFB as it caused me great stress and anxiety, and the workload at my job was increasing. He agreed, and I handed over all digital and physical files related to the campaign to him. My laptop then crashed in early 2020, and I lost all files as I had not backed them up. I do not currently have access to any digital or physical files related to the campaign, except for a few on Gmail. I did not check the email I used for the campaign often, and I thought Dylan was handling communication. I came to find out that he was not, with the violation sent by Mr. Gallagher. In early 2020, Dylan Schwartz's mental health took a turn for the worst. He moved out of our common residence in June 2020, and his mental health struggles, actions, and statements towards me led me to seek an order of protection against him in July 2020. I currently have a temporary order of protection, and I am continuing to pursue a full order of protection. I ceased communication with Dylan in June 2020 and have not had contact since. I will not contact him as I fear for my personal safety. I apologize for taking on a role that I was ill-equipped to handle. I do not ever plan to be a treasurer for a campaign again or to work in politics, as I was only doing it to be supportive of my then partner. Because of these reasons, I asked the Campaign Finance Board for leniency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to respond to, Mr. Gallagher, before I ask other members of the board if they have questions for Mr. Jerkowitz?
No, thank you, Chair. The only thing I would say is that Mr. Jerkowitz did say that he tried to reach out to those employees, which is the basis of the contributions over the limit. We just didn't see the email seeking communication with those employees. So it's the violation, accepting contributions over the limit are due to the underpayment of employment contracts. The employees, as Mr. Jerkowitz said, ended employment early, but we have no evidence of that. He did try to contact them, but we also don't have evidence of those contacts being made.
Well, of course, we do now have Mr. Jerkowitz's testimony today.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Mr. Jerkowitz, because it's a rather large penalty, if you could provide any more information or detail about the departure of those 3 employees, it might be helpful. And then, because I'm sure that's on the mind of other members of the board as well.
I will do my best and find those emails that I tried sending. A lot of the emails were no longer active, so I got bounce backs and phone numbers were no longer reachable.
But in terms of your own personal knowledge of when they stopped working for the campaign, could you just sort of describe what you know? Because we can take into account and credit your testimony as evidence in this matter. So I think we'd like to hear more from you.
Thank you. Like I said, I was really behind the scenes. I wasn't in touch with the day-to-day staffing, but I know that William, there a lot of times the staffing changes had to do with disagreements within the campaign, negativity, and they many times would leave suddenly. William Gallagher, I believe, left. I was not sure of what reasons. I knew that there were disagreements between him and Dylan Schwartz, the candidate, as well as the one who, I'm forgetting her name, but she was high up in the campaign. She had actually moved from Florida to work on the campaign, and she had a disagreement with the candidate, and she subsequently left suddenly. And the other staffer, the third one, I believe he just got a job in another role. I'm not sure if there was disagreements, but I believe he just left the job for another job. I apologize for not having further details.
Is the woman you're talking about Catherine Dowling?
Yes, Catherine Dowling.
What were the circumstances surrounding the post-election $4,500 payment to you?
I apologize. I don't. I was being paid as treasurer, and in all honesty, the payments were sustaining our rent and expenses. I went into about $10,000 in credit debt around that time because Dylan did not have income. I thought that I recall that all payments were made prior to, and I apologize if there was an error in that. I don't remember making payment to myself after the election.
Do you recall what your overall compensation was supposed to have been, and how much in fact you received?
There was a contract. I don't have access to that file. I apologize. There was a monthly payment set, and I do not recall. I apologize.
Mr. Gallagher, do we have a copy of that contract?
I would have to look if we have the contract. It's not as an exhibit, but we do have the payments in the board memo are listed. It looks like Mr. Jerkowitz was paid $800 a month for August and September, and that increased to $1,600 in October and November. And then the final payment was the post-election payment of $4,500.
So back to you, Mr. Jerkowitz. The final payment seems to be obviously in a larger amount. Do you have any recollection as to why the amount was? I understand you don't remember the chronology very well, but why would that final payment have been so much higher?
I'm not recalling. A lot of my actions during the campaign were taken at the advice of other people in the campaign who worked in politics. So a lot of times I was simply taking their word and advice as professionals in the field. If I did take that amount, I apologize. Like I said, I was mostly doing it in service to my partner, and we would not have been able to afford our rent payments and bills if not for those payments from the campaign.
Let me ask a question. Do I understand, though, that your general position, apart from this payment, is that after the election, you really did not play any role in follow-up in terms of dealing with the CFB or anything like that?
Yes, I honestly stumbled along. I remember a day when I went to training at the CFB and I was getting paperwork and I accidentally gave it to the Board of Elections, and the Board of Elections wouldn't give me the paperwork back. And it was,
No, but
And-
after the election, if I understood your statement, you really didn't play any role in the campaign after the election.
correct. I really wanted to, it was causing me such stress that I asked my then partner to finish the communication with the CFB.
Thank you.
Any other questions by members of the board? There being none, I guess we're done unless you have any final word, Mr. Jerkowitz, that you'd like to add.
I would simply say about the $4,500, I still have the same personal bank account that I was using during the campaign. And what I could do is see if during that time after the campaign, if there was a $4,500 deposit into my account, and provide that as proof either way.
Okay.
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
I'd like to address just very briefly the complete failure to respond in any way, substantive way, to the initial document request and to respond to the draft audit report, for which there are significant penalties. And that obligation is an obligation of the treasurer. Can maybe Mr. Gallagher describe that obligation and what was done in response to it? And maybe Mr. Jerkowitz can respond, why there was no response whatsoever.
Sure. So we did receive one response from Mr. Jerkowitz to the IDR, where he contacted the campaign. The CFB staff had contacted the campaign and said, we never received your IDR response. And I think at that point, Mr. Jerkowitz was receiving those emails and just said, we'll get it, we'll get that to you. And I'm not reading into the motivation, but I assume that was him saying, I'll contact the candidate and make sure he gets that to you. But it is incumbent on the treasurer and the candidate. They both signed the certification saying that they understand that there's large penalties in excess of $10,000 for failing to provide any response to the draft audit report. So that's in the certification that's signed by the treasurer and the candidate. And the reason the penalties are so large is because it doesn't allow staff to conduct the audit and extends the timeline, as we're in 2022 discussing this campaign. So the response to the enforcement notice, being the first time we hear from the campaign, creates a lot of impediments and work for CFB staff.
But I'd like to hear Mr. Jerkowitz's response to that. But also, before we do that, Mr. Gallagher, how often are treasurers on a percentage basis paid compensation for their work as treasurer, if you know?
Oh gosh, I would have to find out. I certainly see it more often than not that a treasurer is paid, but I'm not sure of the exact percentage.
In any event, it's not unusual.
It's not
No,
unusual for
it's
a
not
treasurer to be
unusual.
paid.
No, sorry, it's not unusual at all.
Responding to, I did fail to respond. I have no other response. As I said, my entire time as the treasurer was an extremely stressful one. I thought I was doing things wrong. I was stumbling along and had very little support from other staff members in the campaign to ensure that I was doing things correctly. So that was a failure on my part. That I think I was simply trying to avoid the stress.
All right. Thank you. Anything further? All right. Well, I think that completes our hearing for today, but not the full hearing on this matter, which can be continued at our next meeting. And so at this point, I'll make a motion that we go into executive session. And since we'll not be reporting back in public, we'll adjourn directly from the executive session. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. And we are completed with our business for today. Thank you very much. And Mr. Jerkowitz, thank you for your appearance.
Thank
Good
you.
day, everybody.